Architecture tells stories, stories of time, society, and the human spirit. When we walk through a city, we see structures that reflect the hopes and struggles of different eras. Some buildings appear sleek, minimal, and perfectly balanced, while others feel raw, bold, and unapologetically heavy. These two seemingly opposite expressions belong to two iconic movements in modern design, Bauhaus and Brutalism. Both changed the way we think about architecture, art, and function, but they did so in very different ways. To understand their contrast, we have to journey back to where modern design began, with the birth of modernism. In the early 20th century, after the Industrial Revolution and the devastation of World War I, Europe was searching for a new identity. The world was transforming rapidly. Machines, mass production, and new materials like steel and glass were redefining how people lived. Architects and artists began to question traditional beauty. The ornate and decorative styles of the 19th century, like Baroque and Art Nouveau, felt outdated and disconnected from modern life. A new idea emerged: design should be simple, honest, and functional. This idea became the seed for modernism, and from that seed grew two major movements: the Bauhaus in the early 1900s and Brutalism in the mid-20th century. The Bauhaus movement began in 1919 in Weimar, Germany, when architect Walter Gropius founded a revolutionary school called Das Staatliche Bauhaus, or simply, Bauhaus, meaning, building house. But Bauhaus was much more than an architecture school. It was a radical experiment in art, design, and education. Gropius wanted to bridge the gap between art, craft, and industry. At that time, artists were seen as separate from craftsmen or builders, but Gropius believed they should work together to create a new kind of functional beauty. His philosophy was simple yet powerful: form follows function. In other words, every design should be guided by its purpose, not by decoration or tradition. Bauhaus designs were stripped of unnecessary ornamentation. They used clean lines, geometric forms, and a focus on proportion and balance. Materials like steel, glass, and concrete were embraced not just for their strength, but for their aesthetic honesty. The Bauhaus style was light, airy, and modern, a reflection of optimism in a new technological age. The school's teachers and artists, including Paul Klee, Wassily Kandinsky, Marcel Breuer, and Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, blended art and design in new ways. They created buildings, furniture, posters, and everyday objects that were beautiful because they were functional. One of the best examples of Bauhaus architecture is the Bauhaus building in Dessau, designed by Walter Gropius in 1925. With its glass curtain walls, asymmetrical layout, and steel frame, it embodied everything the movement stood for: simplicity, clarity, and harmony between form and function. Other examples include the Vegas factory, the Barcelona pavilion by Mies van der Rohe, and the Tugendhat house in Brno. These buildings looked futuristic for their time and still influence architects today. However, Bauhaus wasn't just about buildings. It revolutionized everything from graphic design and furniture to typography and photography. The minimalist aesthetic that defines modern design, think of IKEA furniture, Apple's product design, or Google's clean interfaces, all traced their roots back to Bauhaus principles. Unfortunately, the school's progressive and international nature clashed with the rising Nazi regime, which labeled it as degenerate art. The Bauhaus was forced to close in 1933, but its teachers spread its ideas worldwide, especially to the United States, where Gropius and Mies van der Rohe continued to teach and design. Bauhaus became the foundation for modern design education, and a symbol of how art and technology could serve humanity. Fast forward 2 decades, and the world looked very different. After World War II, cities across Europe lay in ruins. There was an urgent need to rebuild, to provide housing, universities, and government buildings quickly and cheaply. Architects wanted to respond to this new reality with honesty and strength. From this post-war context emerged a movement that took modernist principles to their rawest extreme: brutalism. The term brutalism comes from the French phrase, beaten brut, meaning raw concrete, a term popularized by the great architect Le Corbusier. While Bauhaus emphasized lightness and precision, Brutalism celebrated raw materials, bold structures, and monumental presence. It rejected smoothness and elegance in favor of roughness and truth. Where Bauhaus sought harmony, Brutalism sought honesty, showing materials exactly as they were, unpolished and unpainted. Brutalist architecture emerged in the 1950s and 60s and quickly spread across Europe and North America. It was led by architects such as Le Corbusier, Alison and Peter Smithson, Paul Rudolph, and Ern Goldfinger. Interestingly, Marcel Breuer, one of the key Bauhaus designers, also became a major Brutalist architect, showing how closely the two movements were connected. Brutalist buildings were often massive, geometric, and fortress-like. They used heavy concrete, deep shadows, and repetitive patterns. The rough texture of the concrete, often imprinted with the wood grain of the formwork, gave each building a unique, sculptural quality. Examples include Le Corbusier's Unite D habitation in Marseille, the Barbican Centre in London, Boston City Hall, and Trellick Tower. These buildings were not meant to be pretty, they were meant to be honest, strong, and socially meaningful. Brutalism reflected the post-war desire for progress and equality. Many Brutalist projects were public housing complexes, universities, or government buildings, built to serve ordinary people. The architects saw themselves as building a new kind of social order, architecture for everyone, not just the wealthy. However, while the intentions were noble, public perception eventually turned against Brutalism. By the 1970s, its massive concrete forms were often seen as cold, oppressive, and ugly. Many Brutalist buildings fell into disrepair and were demolished. Yet in recent years, Brutalism has undergone a revival, admired for its honesty, craftsmanship, and daring sculptural forms. So what exactly separates Bauhaus from Brutalism? At first glance, they share similarities, both reject ornamentation, both believe in function over form, and both aim to serve society. But their philosophies and aesthetics differ profoundly. Bauhaus emerged from optimism, a belief that art, design, and technology could create a better, more harmonious world. Its forms are light, rational, and elegant. Brutalism, on the other hand, was born out of realism, a world rebuilding from destruction, focusing on strength, permanence, and raw truth. Its forms are heavy, monumental, and unrefined. While Bauhaus uses glass and steel to express transparency and modernity, Brutalism uses concrete to express honesty and endurance. Bauhaus buildings often feel open, balanced, and bright. Brutalist ones feel enclosed, monumental, and sculptural. Bauhaus expresses idealism, Brutalism expresses realism. In a sense, Brutalism can be seen as the tough, rebellious child of Bauhaus, carrying forward its functional ideals but stripping away its elegance and polish. Despite their differences, both movements share an enduring legacy. Bauhaus continues to shape the world of graphic design, minimalism, and modern consumer products. Its influence can be seen in almost every clean, functional design today, from smartphones to furniture to user interfaces. Brutalism, meanwhile, has found new life in digital culture and art. Digital Brutalism, in web design, borrows its bold, unpolished aesthetics. Many cities are now preserving Brutalist buildings as part of cultural heritage, recognizing their architectural honesty and emotional power. In the end, the story of Bauhaus and Brutalism is not one of opposition, but of evolution. Bauhaus dreamed of a world where art and industry worked together for social good. Brutalism carried that dream into a harsher reality, using raw materials to express resilience and truth. Both remind us that architecture is more than just walls and roofs, it's a reflection of our values, our struggles, and our hopes. So, the next time you walk by a building of glass and steel, think of Bauhaus, the dream of clarity, function, and beauty in simplicity. And when you pass by a massive concrete structure, think of Brutalism, the honesty of material, the strength of structure, and the story of a world rebuilt from ruins. Both movements, in their own ways, remind us that architecture is not just about how buildings look, it's about what they mean.